Hi everyone, my name is Alex Woodside and I'm here to give you some tips and tricks to help you prepare for the NSBA 8th grade All-State Percussion Audition. In this video, I'm going to be covering some more detailed recommendations for the snare drum portion of the audition. If you find this video helpful, make sure to check out the other videos in the series as you prepare for the different sections of the audition material. Let's start with the snare drum rudiment, the multiple bounce roll. The first recommendation I have for the multiple bounce roll is to read the performance instructions carefully. As of the recording of this video, the instructions say to play a forte piano crescendo multiple bounce buzz roll over 16 counts at a tempo of quarter note equals 120 beats per minute. Now I know that's a lot, but make sure to pay attention to each step in detail. These instructions are very specific, so it's important that your buzz rolls meet all of these criteria. To create a good forte piano sound at the beginning of your roll, start with your right hand in the middle of the drum head, ready to play a forte buzz, but your left hand at the edge of the drum, ready to play a piano buzz. This way, we can ensure that the initial sound of the roll will be loud, and then the roll will immediately become soft as the instructions dictate. In time, it'll sound like this. Immediately after the right hand plays its first loud buzz, it should join the left hand at the edge like this. Let the roll stay soft for a few counts before beginning your crescendo. 16 counts at 120 BPM is quite a bit of time. We want a crescendo to be gradual. As you crescendo, bring both hands back to the center of the drum and finish the roll with a loud forte release note like this. My second recommendation for the multiple bounce roll is to use a 16th note roll bass. This means that our hands are moving at a 16th note speed, while the weight of our arm and the energy at the fulcrum create a sustained buzz sound. It's a good idea to practice playing just the roll bass with a metronome to make sure that your hands are moving at the correct speed, like this. You can start by playing even 16th notes for the duration of the roll at the same dynamic to ensure that you're keeping a consistent rhythm speed. Next, add the dynamics to your hand speed exercise to make sure that you can keep a consistent rhythm speed while changing your stick heights. The last step, of course, is to add the buzzes to your hand speed exercise. My last recommendation for the multiple bounce roll is to remember that the goal of the buzz roll is to create a sustained sound on the snare drum. We want to avoid any inconsistencies or sudden changes in tone, volume, or technique. To create the most sustained sound possible, think about overlapping your buzzes or starting a buzz stroke before the previous buzz stroke is finished. If we slow it down, it would sound something like this. Try playing alternating buzz strokes and make them last as long as possible. Then, start to increase your hand speed, but don't change the length of the buzz. Keep doing this until you reach a consistent, sustained buzz sound on the snare drum. Next, let's take a look at the snare drum etude and consider some ways that we can increase our musicality while performing it. My first recommendation for the etude portion of the snare drum audition is to find a tempo at which you can perform this etude consistently and accurately. The marked tempo asks you to perform the etude anywhere between quarter note equals 108 BPM and 120 BPM. However, it's more important to be rhythmically accurate than it is to be fast. So if you need to play it slightly slower in order to be accurate, do that. Keep in mind though, we do have to maintain the character of the music, so I wouldn't go any slower than about 100 BPM when you go to record your audition. In order to perform this etude with a sense of pulse and musicality, you have to be picky about the timing of your rhythms, especially the syncopated ones. As you practice, turn on the 16th note subdivision on your metronome so that you can make sure each note lines up precisely with the correct click or sound from the metronome. Begin by practicing tricky rhythms at a very slow tempo and ensuring that you are executing them correctly. Once you can perform each rhythm with consistent accuracy, move the metronome up 3 BPM and repeat the process until you reach your target tempo. When playing the rolls that are written throughout the etude, use a multiple bounce roll in the same 16th note roll bass that we discussed in the rudiment section of this video. Again, the goal is to create a consistent, sustained buzz sound in your rolls. So try overlapping the buzzes from hand to hand, making sure that the listener can't hear the initial attack of each stroke. You also need to make sure that the rolls end with a crisp single release note rather than an additional buzzed stroke. Here's an example of a good crisp single release note. And here's an example of the additional buzzed stroke release I was talking about. Obviously, we want to go with the first one so that we hear a clear, crisp end to each roll. All of the rolls in this etude are tied to a single stroked note, so make sure you clearly articulate the ends of the rolls. It's also going to be very important that you pay close attention to the dynamics and articulations written in this etude. We need to be able to express all dynamic levels between piano and forte, so be sure to clearly differentiate between these during your playing. If there's a crescendo or decrescendo present, you will need to move gradually and smoothly through these changes in volume. However, if there is no crescendo or decrescendo, make sure your changes in dynamic happen instantly and intentionally. The accents written into this etude also play an important role in our ability to make it sound musical. There are two different types of accents written in this etude: regular accents that look like tiny decrescendos, and marcato accents that are sometimes referred to as housetop accents. Both of these accents require us to play their notes louder than the ones around them, but the marcato accents should be played slightly more strongly and boldly than the regular accents. There are a large number of drags written into this etude. You can use the rudimental interpretation of this rudiment where you play specifically 2 grace notes leading into a primary note. That sounds like this. Or you can use the orchestral interpretation where the grace notes are interpreted more like a soft buzz leading into a primary note, and that sounds more like this. Although I'm using the orchestral interpretation of the roll with the multiple bounce roll, I am actually going to be using the rudimental interpretation of the drag just because I think it sounds a little bit cleaner and more articulate. However, either way is valid when performing your audition. The most important thing to remember when playing these drags is to keep your grace notes low. It should be very clear to the listener which notes are the grace notes and which note is the primary note. Also remember that we need to find a balance between being too closed and too open with our drags. Open drags that are too open are going to have the grace notes too far away from the primary note. Drags that are too closed are the opposite. Those grace notes are going to be too close to the primary note. Try to find the sweet spot when playing grace notes so that they add texture to the primary note, but it still sounds like one cohesive musical idea rather than two separate ones. There are a few sections in this etude that have been really tricky for students in the past, and if you can master these spots, you can really set your audition apart from your peers in a good way. One of the rhythm values that has consistently tripped up percussionists in the past is actually the quarter rest that appears in measures 30, 35, and 39. After playing 16th note based rhythms for most of the etude leading up to these points, the quarter rests can feel like they last a long time. Try counting through these measures to figure out when each note should sound. For example, in measure 35, we see the quarter rest happens on beat 1. That means the roll starts on beat 2, and the quarter note release happens on beat 4. Make sure to pay close attention to the counting. Make sure to count these rhythms with your metronome to make sure that you're playing them correctly. Another spot that seems to give students a lot of trouble is the section between measures 23 and 26, when we're asked to play drags mixed in with repeating eighth notes leading up to a quarter note roll. These drags can cause for some pretty tricky motions if we try to alternate our sticking throughout the section. We can avoid this by just putting all of the eighth notes and all the primary notes of the drags in the right hand. This way, the left hand can focus on creating the soft grace notes of the drags, while the right hand focuses on creating a consistent tone and a steady beat. Should sound something like this. Another passage that will require close attention in this etude is measures 37 and 38, where we're asked to play steady 16th notes while crescendoing and decrescendoing. This can be deceptively tricky because we need to maintain a consistent rhythm speed while changing the direction of our dynamics at specific times. When practicing this section, try practicing it one dynamic direction at a time. For example, practice the 2-beat crescendo on beats 1 and 2 in measure 37. Pause, then play a decrescendo on beats 3 and 4. If you're satisfied with your dynamic changes, go back and do it again, but take less time during your pause. Repeat this process until there is no pause in your 16th notes. Then do the same thing for the 1-beat versions of this dynamic shape. Another challenging section of this etude is the repeating drag pattern that happens in measures 44 and 45. The first step to mastering this section is to understand that it's a pattern made up of a drag followed by 2 16th notes and an eighth note. The pattern itself sounds like this. That pattern then repeats itself 4 times, getting louder each time it sounds. Begin working on this section by playing the bass rhythm without any drags or accents, like this. When you're comfortable playing the bass rhythm with accurate timing, add the accents and drags back in, making sure that you don't change the rhythmic timing you just established. Put it together and it should sound like this. One more section of this etude that can be challenging for young players is measures 46 through 48. The first step to understanding this section of the music is to count it out. It's important that you know which part of the beat each single note lands on and how it relates to the metronome. Next, take out all the accents and drags and just play the bass rhythm at a very slow tempo to make sure that you're comfortable with the rhythmic timing. We put that together, it should sound like this. Then add the drags back in, but again, make sure that you don't affect the timing of the rhythms that you've just established. That sounds like this at a slow tempo. I find it easiest to play all of the primary notes in this section with the right hand, with the exception of the 2/16 notes on beat 4 of measure 47, so that I can maintain a consistent tone and prevent awkward motions with the left hand alternating quickly between single primary notes and double-stroked grace notes. However, any sticking you prefer that produces a good tone and accurate rhythmic timing is valid. Up to tempo, I like to play it like this. I hope you found this video helpful in preparing the snare drum portion of your audition. If you haven't already, be sure to check out the other videos in this series that are designed to help you with the mallet and timpani portions of the percussion audition. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.